Okay. I don't know how to share that. What do you see do you see my screen? Okay. Maybe I can, okay, that was bothering me. Okay, so the idea was to talk a bit about literature reviews in general, why doing them, how to do them, and then present a tool that we built that makes life a bit easier for the literature review. Did you already do a literature review for your PhD? Just a part of it. Okay. Okay, so that's my contact info. So it's going to be we have one hour and minutes. I will go in a very overview manner about literature reviews. So I have time to show the tool. There are lots of articles and presentations about doing literature reviews. I will try to cover the main topics, but it's not a course on literature reviews. Normally I give this talk that I will give today, I give it in 2 classes of 2 hours each. So the idea of a literature review, or the goal of a literature review, is to identify, analyze, and discuss all research with a very specific objective. Doing a literature review is different from reading papers that you receive and trying to learn about these papers. You make a literature review because you have a very clear objective. For example, you have a question and you want to find the answer in the literature. Or that's not normally the case when you read papers because you're trying to understand something. If you read papers with a question, you go straight trying to find the answer. And if you realize that the answer is not there, you just drop the paper, you don't try to understand everything. Another reason why you make a literature review sometimes is because you want to see what has been done and what hasn't. That is the case when you start defining your PhD. In that case, you have an idea of the question, you have an idea of the problem you want to solve, and you want to see what is missing, so you define your topic. Or another scenario could be that you have a problem. This is quite common in medicine. You have a problem and you want to see if in the literature there is a treatment for that. And a literature review, the product of a literature review is an article. It's a document that is based on primary sources, on articles. So because of that, it's called a secondary study, because to write this paper, you read other papers. It's different from doing an experiment and writing the paper with the results of the experiment. That would be a primary study. There are 3 main forms of literature reviews. One of them is the related work. That's the simplest one, the less systematic, and the less extensive. And it's the one that we do when we are writing an article. We write an article and we have a related work section, and we have to make sure that the person that is reading our paper, for example, a reviewer, knows that we are aware of everything that is related to our paper. If there are any other alternatives to the solution we propose, we discuss them and show differences. If there are other applications of the things we are doing, we have to mention them. So the focus of a literature review for related work is normally, I have my paper, I know what I did, and I need to either with help of my advisor, colleagues, or by being systematic, I need to find everything that is related. Normally, this is 10 articles. And and you get to those 10 articles because you know before you wrote that paper, you've read a lot of papers. Uh, and there are two other literature reviews that involve doing extensive searches. One of them is called the mapping study. Let's say that you're starting your PhD and you need to find a topic. And because your advisor works on multi-criteria decision analysis and you like neural networks, you want to find the connection. So you do searches in different search databases to try to find everything that may connect these two areas. And it's called a mapping because you don't have specific questions to answer. You just want to create a map of how does the intersection between these two topics look like. You want to understand how you have very wide questions. You're looking to a lot of material, trying to make sense of it to identify a place to work. That's called a mapping study. And then, and it's also systematic. I will come now why it's systematic. And then there is the most famous one, the most well-known one, that is the systematic literature review that starts with very well-defined questions. You have these questions like, the more specific these questions are, the better will be the focus of your literature review. For example, let's say you're working on, you will start working on design characteristics of online communication systems like chat, social nets, or whatever, that minimize the existence of fake news. So I was very specific. In fact, I could have been more specific if that were my topic, and saying, my goal is to find applications of word embedding techniques in that. Very specific. So I will transform that statement into how are word embeddings used to minimize the introduction of fake news into social networks? What is the effect of word embeddings versus, I don't know, other technique? Very specific questions. And I will use those questions to identify the papers that have answers. So the article that I write at the end is an article very specific to those questions. And because of the way I will do the research of articles, I can ensure that everything that is said, written, that is related to those questions was covered. And that's the systematic part of it. When you do a systematic mapping study or a systematic literature review, you have a focus and you have a method of finding articles, and studying them and reporting that ensures that you covered everything that was available to answer those questions. That's why it's systematic. And while in a related work literature review, we talk about 10, 20 papers, some of which were given to you by a reviewer, maybe, or by an advisor. In a systematic mapping study and a systematic literature review, we talk about hundreds. Because what you do is, you need to, let's go back to the example that I gave. Fake news, word embeddings, social networks, groupware, those are the words, the keywords that may be in an article. So I need to search in all the literature databases to find any article that may have something about that topic. And that could give me, I don't know, sometimes you get 1,000 articles that you need to go through to decide which ones you keep to read and to answer the questions. So, and that's the systematic part of it, because the result of a systematic literature review or mapping is either a section in a paper a chapter in the PhD thesis or a paper itself. And the two most relevant are the chapter in the thesis and the paper. You have to be sure that you did it as a scientist, not just by choosing the papers you liked, but everything. It has academic, a review is a research result in itself. And it's systematic because it follows a process that you document in the article you write. You say, what is the process that you follow? Where did you search? How did you search? How many articles you got? So when I read your paper, if I follow the same steps, I get to the same results. It has to be auditable. So I need to be sure, because you tell me how you did the review. I need to did I knock? No. I need to be sure by the way, by what you tell me about your method, that you did it in a serious way, that you were serious about it. And if I want to do it, I follow your instructions and I get to the same conclusions. Well, in a literature review, you only recognize white literature, official recognizable literature. Yeah, and sometimes you do it on your own. Sometimes you need a team to do this, especially because there is a part of the process where you need to read an article and decide, you read an abstract and you decide, is this article relevant for our question or not? And it's better if there are two people doing that, or three. Or sometimes there are so many articles that you cannot, if you have, I don't know, if you have 50 articles to read in full, well, maybe if you're three, each of you can read 25 and you make sure that every article was read by two people. So conclusions are based on more than one opinion. Okay, so that's systematic literature review, especially if you want to write a chapter of the thesis or a paper that is a literature review, has to follow a specific process that has to be auditable and reproducible. And it has mainly, there are three steps. It's even Spanish. You planify, you plan, you execute, you report. So when you plan, the first part of the plan is, I want to do a literature review or a scoping review, a literature mapping on fake news and word embeddings. It's a combination that I don't know if it makes sense. So this will imply that I will search for lots of papers. Before that, I have to make sure that it makes sense to do a review. First thing I do is there a review, a literature review on these topics? Because every PhD student in the world has to do a literature review to make sure that he or she is working on a topic that nobody else worked. So every one of these students either wrote a chapter of a thesis or a literature review paper. So it's quite possible that for many of the literature reviews that we can think of, there is already one. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to do one. Once you decide, yes, we need to do one, you have to be very specific about the questions that you want to answer. Otherwise, you will end up reading papers, trying to understand every sentence of the paper without any focus. If you have clear questions, you read the paper. As soon as you realize that it doesn't have an answer, you stop reading, even if you didn't understand the full of the paper. So questions are very important. You decide you have to be explicit about the criteria that you use to select the articles in terms of quality. For example, you would say, I will only include articles that are full articles, no short papers, no abstracts. That's a quality criteria. I will only include articles that have an evaluation. If they don't have evaluation, I won't include them. I will only include articles in English, articles in journals Q3 and up. There are different criteria. Basically, what you try to make sure is that you have to convey to the person that is reading your review that every piece that you covered, every valid, good piece of literature available. And then you define a protocol. The protocol is the steps, even the template that you use when you read the paper to take notes. Because again, for me, this difference is very important. When you start your PhD, your advisor gives you 2 or 3 papers that you need to read and understand in full. Your purpose is to learn from those articles. When you do a review, you want to answer questions. So you read with a different focus. It may be even possible that there are parts of the paper that you don't read. For example, the implementation details. If the article has implementation details and your questions didn't have to do with how, then you don't read that part. And this is something you put in your protocol. Your protocol is somehow a way of a form, a card that you will fill with every article. The notes that you need to take, that in some form they follow your questions. For example, you could have a protocol that says, I will read every article by writing down the year of publication, the place where it was published, the answer to this question, this question, this question. And I will also write down, if they had an example, what was the domain of the example? Education, medicine. It's the protocol is the plan, the organization for reading. Once you have your questions and your protocol are part of the question. You start. Your questions are part of your protocol. You go do the search, and you basically need to search, trying to find every article that could be relevant. I will talk more about searching in a minute. You search, and you search in all databases that could be important. For example, when you did your, I'm here for those that hear the record. I'm here with Antoine. When you were doing your, when you did your search, which database did you search in? Google Scholar. Google Scholar. Okay, so yeah, Web of Science. Yeah, so there are many ways we can find articles. Some ways are more formal and reproducible than others. Some ways give us more information than others. For example, if you look in Google Scholar, if you make a search in Google Scholar, and I make the same search in Google Scholar in Argentina, we will possibly get different results, because Google is not a bibliographic database. It's a search engine that has this personalization thing. There are specific literature databases like Scopus, IEEE, Explore, ACM, Digital Library, Web of Science, DBLP. And for computer scientists, the rule is that if you have access to the 5 of them, once you have your questions, you transform your questions into a search query, and you run the search query in the 5 of them, because they have intersections, but it's possible that one of them has papers that the other one doesn't have. So part of searching is, at least you show to the one reading your review that you covered all the bases, all the databases. I will go a bit into search. So you will have, that's how you end up with 1,000 articles, because in my case, I would put fake news, and not only fake news, but some synonyms, other ways of saying fake news. And I will put chat, social network, groupware, collaboration tool, different ways of doing. And I will put prevent, stop, I don't know, other words for saying the same thing. And this will be my keywords. And even though I will connect them with some logical connectors, they will give me lots of results, because some articles will have these words used, but with a different meaning. The more general your word, for example, if you use engineering as one of the words, engineering, engineer, or develop, or developing, you will get lots of papers, because those are words that are used in many areas. So you from those thousands, you, by looking at the abstracts, you decide this goes in, this goes out, include, exclude. You look, once you decide, okay, this I will include, you look at a bit more and decide, do they have enough quality? Oh no, this is just an abstract. We will exclude this one. And then we will have a bunch of, from 1,000, we may have 100 articles that we need to read in full. Up to that point, we were working only with the information from the database: title, author, place of publication, abstract. Now we need to get the full PDF, and we need to read it. And to read that, we use our protocol, because we want to make sure that we don't read the whole paper if it's not necessary. Does it propose a method to stop fake news? Because that's the thing that I want to answer. If it doesn't propose a method, then okay, I discard it. And I take notes of everything. That's what extract information means. I will talk a bit about it. And then I read all my 100 papers. And now I forget the papers, but I have my 100 cards with the notes that I took from every paper. Now I have to synthesize that and make graphs, make conclusions. I had my 5, 3, 2 research questions. And now I need to read all my notes and make an answer to this question, to each of the questions. That's synthesized answers. And then the last part is write the article. Is it going to be a chapter in the thesis, or is it going to be a paper that I will publish? That has to do with the format. So that's basically doing a literature review. So it's a task that is very, it has to be done very, in a very systematic, mechanical way, because you cannot miss any steps, and you don't want to do any effort that is not necessary, and it has to be in a way that is reproducible. And there are lots of notes that you have to take, and normally you do this with someone else in collaboration. So, what time is it? Yeah. Because you to this point, what do you think? So do you have any question? Does it rings any bell to you? Okay. So now you have an idea that you. Okay. So.
In Spanish?
No, because the record won't work. Otherwise, afterwards we can do some Spanish practice. Okay, so I will share the PowerPoint slides with you, and a couple of examples. There is a review and there is a mapping that we did as examples. Now, we didn't do them as examples. We did it for real, but I used them as examples. And there is some more detail there about the different, how to write the research questions, how to search. I'll now briefly show the main search engines that we use, and then go straight to the demo. So this is half and half. I did the translation last night. So there are search engines that are specific for literature. And they have two things inside. They have what is called bibliographic records. That's the meta information of an article. And sometimes they also have the PDF, the full text. Sometimes you can also search in the metadata. Sometimes you can search in the metadata and full text. Most of the work of systematic literature review is done on metadata, because the part of searching and the part of filtering is done on the abstracts and titles and places of publication. And the last part, the reading, is done on the full texts. Sometimes the search engine you have access to, the database you have access to, provides only bibliographic records. And if you decide that that article is included, you need to find the article somewhere else. So an interesting part of transforming the plan into the search, that's an interesting aspect. So this is an example. Let's take this as an example. This is a review that wanted to answer those questions, those research question 1 to 5. What are the approaches of personalization in gamified collaborative systems? What are the approaches of adaptation in gamified? This review had a very specific focus. Wanted to answer these questions. Now, we need to transform these questions into queries to the search engines. So you get the main terms, it's called the major terms. In this case, we chose adaptation, gamification, collaborative. That means that any article that has the three of them, it's a candidate. Then we have to read it to make sure that they are used in the way we use them here. But at least if they have the three of them, are good candidates. And the other thing that you do is, for each of the terms, you try to find alternative ways of saying that, or synonyms. So in fact, we need to search in all search databases using a query like this, a query that does. Either it has one of this, so it has to have in the title, in the keywords, or in the abstracts, one of the forms of saying adaptation, and one of the forms of saying gamification, and one of the forms of saying collaborative. The research questions and the search terms and the inclusion and exclusion criteria is something that you include in your literature review chapter or in your literature review paper, because this is what the reader will read to say, did he do it right? Oh, no, he was missing another way of saying collaborative. So once you have the search terms, you create a query like this. And then you decide, okay, where will I search? And depending on the search language of the platform you will use, for example, Scopus is one of the most popular one, has a lot of records. It's for many disciplines, not just computer science. For sure, you have access here. You can export the results, you get the abstracts. And the syntax they use for queries is not exactly the one that I created at the beginning, but it's similar. You need to say where you want to search. In the title, abstract, or keywords, any of this. And in the title, abstract, or keywords, any of this. And then this is your inclusion exclusion criteria that you can add to the query. Limit to computer science, because maybe these words are also used in medicine, but with a different meaning. And then I only want conference proceedings and articles. And only from 14 to 19, in this research, it made sense to start at that point, and only in language. So that's the query. And every database, so the ones we use are Scopus, IEEE Explore. This is more for engineering. They have a different syntax. Once you learn the syntax, you know how to translate the query. You see the same. This is the same query, but using the syntax, query syntax of IEEE. The digital library of ACM that has a different syntax, and then there is DBLP that doesn't have abstracts, but it's also another place, and this is the one that is really open. All of the other, you need some sort of subscription. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say about doing literature reviews. You can do literature reviews using those databases and taking notes in anything you want. Before building the tool that I will show now, we would use Excel or spreadsheets from Google Spreadsheets, because we had, for every article, we had to decide, do we include it or not? And you need to keep note of everything, even of the articles that you excluded. You need to keep them, because at the end, when you publish the results of the review, you have to say, I used these queries in these engines. I got this many, and these many were left out. But you need to be able to count them. And then for each of them, you need to take notes, answer each of the questions. Did they use Java or C++ or what, if that's important? What was the domain of application? What technique did they use to evaluate the results? How many studies did they make? Did they evaluate it with students only or in industry? You take many notes. So normally we would use an Excel with many columns, but Excel is very difficult to use to take notes. And Excel doesn't help you. You will have to combine search results from many databases. You can export them in Excel if you want, but they will have duplicates. So you need to clean them up. So those are some of the tasks that the tool that we develop helps solving.